Hi everybody, welcome to Steelers Live. I'm Missi Matthews. A lot to get to today in terms of the Steelers free agency tracker and also what came out of the owners meetings that were held virtually this week. But first, we do know that there will be 17 games in the regular season for 2021, 9 home games for all AFC teams, including the Steelers. They will be hosting the Seattle Seahawks here at Heinz Field sometime during the season. The schedule release going to take place a little bit later in the spring. And also, just to give you a timeline of what this means, having 17 regular season games and only 3 preseason games. This is what the NFL owners did approve. The Hall of Fame game, the Steelers will be facing the Cowboys. That remains on Thursday, August 5th, followed by 3 other preseason games, then NFL kickoff weekend starting Thursday, September 9th, and that weekend staying after Labor Day, the true and regular season schedule for the NFL, and then the Super Bowl a little bit later than we are used to seeing it, Sunday, February 13th, 2022. So that is what it looks like. And Bob Labriola of Steelers.com had a chance to catch up with team president Rooney II, who said due to there only being 3 preseason games, where there typically would have been a 4th, that is now an off week for teams or a bye week. So it'll be interesting to see what teams do during that week as cutdowns happen and they get ready to head into the regular season. So that is one unusual thing about it. I did have a chance yesterday to catch up with Judy, Battista of NFL Network to talk all things owners meetings and much more. Take a listen. Judy, thanks as always for joining us. I wish this was in person somewhere nice and warm, but here we are. The owners held their meetings virtual once again, and I think the worst kept secret, of course, the approval of the 17-game regular season. Tell us everything we need to know about that decision and what that's going to mean for the 2021 season.
Yeah, worst kept secret really for like a year. We've known that this was coming since the CBA was approved last March. So this was very much a rubber stamp, 17 games, 3 preseason games. There's not going to be an additional bye week. So it will be 17 games in 18 weeks. Everything just gets pushed back a week. Season is still starting right after Labor Day, that week after Labor Day. So the Super Bowl will get played a week later. I think it's February 13th in LA, the one for next season. The important and sort of interesting stuff that we need to know is that that 17th game is going to be an interconference matchup, which is actually going to provide some really great matchups that we don't get to see all that often. So I think it's Steelers Seahawks, so
right.
That'll be a good one. And there's Chiefs Packers, so it's going to be based on how you finish in your division. So that'll provide some really good matchups. And starting in 2022, the league is going to take 4 of these games of what would, the extra inventory, 4 of the games from whichever conference is hosting that year. It's going to alternate. They'll take 4 of those games and play them in another country. This is part of the effort to expand the international reach of the NFL. That's going to be a real focus, trying to grow the game in other countries. And they're going to do it. It's not just going to be in London, where we've concentrated so much, or even just in Mexico City. They're looking at playing in Germany, South America, Canada. So it's going to be at least 4 games. And, usually in the past, we sort of joke about how teams don't want to give up a home game and, they sort of have to get teams to volunteer and twist some arms. There's not going to be any of that anymore. This is going to be a formula. Everybody's going to go. So every team will play an international game in an 8-year cycle, which is probably really good for the game, that international games will have the best teams. It won't always just be teams that don't care about giving up a home game. But that's what you need to know. And again, it's going to alternate who gets the 9 home games next year. When this season, when it starts, it will be AFC teams will have 9 home regular season games.
Traveling internationally just sounds weird, being of what our lives have been for the past year.
Right.
But another thing that we heard from the owners' meetings is the anticipation of full stadiums. I am sitting at Heinz Field. I can tell you there were not tons of fans or any fans for most of the games. So full stadium seems bizarre, but as more vaccinations are being administered and just the state of the world, are you hopeful that they will be right in terms of planning for that next season?
Yeah, fingers crossed. I have to be honest, Roger Goodell came out with that himself. That was not prompted by a question. He had a conference call with reporters yesterday, and at the end of his sort of opening statement, he said that, that they expect to have full stadiums in the fall. The way he put it was all of our fans across the league in all of our stadiums, which is as hopeful and optimistic as anybody in the league has sounded in a long time. Last year, as you well know, they were so cautious as they moved along about how they were going to do fans in stadiums. And as you know, in Pittsburgh, there were very few. Here in the New York area, there were none. So that was really hopeful and really optimistic. I just got off a Zoom call with John Mara, the owner of the New York Giants, and he said he is obviously, they're hopeful to have many more fans in the stadium. He says, you know, we don't know what it's going to look like. Obviously, so much of this is going to be up to local authorities, but there's a lot of optimism that the vaccine rollout will continue and that they'll have, you know, it'll be safe to gather again like that, which would obviously be great news. As Roger Goodell put it, like, the game is not the same without fans there. We all saw it last year. It's just an incredibly different environment, and I think we'll all be very happy when we get back to something much closer to normal.
Art Rooney II has also expressed his optimism for full stadiums, and also he told fans last week on a fan conference call that hoping for training camp to go back to St. Vincent College. So before
I would love that too.
We all would, right? But before
Yes.
we could get to training camp, the off-season program, there was a little bit of news in terms of what the owners are kind of hoping for this off-season. I've seen some things on Twitter in terms of the players union. Where do things stand right now in terms of football in shorts, as our good friend Bob Labriola likes to call it?
So where they are right now is they're still talking to the union. The union and the league are still talking to each other. The league has told teams to get ready to start April 19th, I think is the date, and it can be only virtual, those meetings in the beginning. The league wants some in-person work. Not surprising, talk to any coach. Of course, they want in-person work, but that's going to have to come later in the spring, you know, probably closer to when we would have a normal June mini camp. The players union, J.C. Treader, who's the president of the players union, put a statement up on Twitter and said, like, listen, look, we had many fewer injuries last year with everything being virtual. Why do we want to go backwards from that? Like, we need to look at what we learned from last year and apply it going forward. So there's still quite a bit of conversation and negotiation that needs to happen there. But at least in the beginning, it's going to be virtual. The meetings are going to be virtual. I think everybody got really used to that and thought it was productive anyway. But the real question is going to be how much in-person work, if any, can they agree to? And another thing that was sort of interesting in the memo that went out to teams is they are, the league is not going to mandate vaccines for players, coaches, staff, anybody, but they are certainly going to make it worth your while to get the vaccine. They're incentivizing it by saying, people who have the vaccine, or maybe you're going to be able to roll back some of the restrictions that we saw last year. Maybe you're going to be able to spend time in the locker room. You're going to be able to sit down and have a meal in the cafeteria together. All of the things that had to disappear last year, they're hoping to bring back a little bit if they get, strong vaccination results.
All right, all these things sound great. I can't wait for my first trip outside of my house to eat with some friends as well. So we are hopeful. And Judy, thanks as always for your time. We do really appreciate it.
Great to see you.
Okay, thanks once again to Judy for her time yesterday. Taking a look at the Steelers free agency tracker, some recent additions, and you are seeing correctly, Tyson Alualu, if you were on Twitter on Saturday over the weekend, Tom Pelissero of NFL Network breaking the news that he had a change of heart, originally agreeing to terms with Jacksonville, and thanks to the persuasion of some teammates here in Pittsburgh, deciding to stay with the black and gold. You see Jordan Berry there, and then some other new names, including guys like Jarvis Miller and Matthew Sexton, who came from pro day workouts. This is something that Kevin Colbert and Mike Tomlin love to make the pro day circuit, and some guys that they have picked up as well. I had a chance to catch up with Robert Spillane earlier this week to talk about Tyson staying in Pittsburgh.
A family man, an anchor in the middle, a dominant defensive tackle, whatever you want to call him. He's a special person to me. Always walks around the building with a smile and, wants to help younger guys. So that's a guy that you love having on the team. And I'm glad that, Cam Hayward and Joe Hayden were able to, a little bit recruit him to stay. He had COVID, luckily, so he wasn't able to fly down to Jacksonville. Hopefully he's feeling much better and healthy, but Just hearing that news the other day that he was gonna actually sign with the Steelers, I call my mom, Tyson's staying, like, so it's fun to hear that he'll be back with the Steelers next season.
All right, you can catch my full one-on-one with Robert Spillane on Friday. That will be on Steelers.com and the Steelers official mobile app. Thanks so much for joining me here today on Steelers Live. We'll see you guys back here next week at 4 p.m.